Welcome to the video tutorial, Identify Your Ways of Loving by the Love Mandala. Hi, I'm Laura Smith Biswas, and I'm the author of the Cosmology of Love. Thanks for joining us for the tutorial. I'm happy to be here to help you to figure out the process so you can identify your ways of loving and begin the dialogue with your loved ones. I'm hoping that you have your book with you. And one other thing, if you want to download the PDF, this will give you a paper copy that you can write everything out on during the process. And if you don't want to do that or you don't have a printer with you right now, you can use the book as well. So if you have those two things ready and a pen, you'll be set to go. Let me say just a couple words about the book and the concept. I think we've all had the experience where we were in relationship and we really felt like we weren't meeting people. I certainly had that experience with my family, and even just having multiple children. I have 3 daughters. They were very different, and really understanding how to connect with them was a discovery process. And this came to me, and I began to realize that love isn't really something you find, even in romantic relationships. We have that experience where we think we found the one, or we found this person that's going to be with us for the rest of our lives. But that's just the beginning of the story. And it's the opportunity to create love in that relationship when we find that person that we want to build with and learn how to create the conditions where love can thrive. So think of it a little bit about learning the skill set to stoke the fire of your relationship and refine how we express love and experience it. So this book is here to help you cultivate the skill of intimacy, connection, and communicating love. And part of that is actually knowing what you need to know about yourself. It really takes bravery and vulnerability to not only look inside and identify what your needs are, but express them to somebody that you have high stakes with and you really want to receive that from. But it's important to just start with the process of how do we want to be received in love, because we can't go down that path and be brave and just uncover those things until we've at least understood ourselves. So this is part of what the book is about. We want to be able to go inside and access the love that we have also and turn it into something tangible. None of us want to have that experience where we come to the end of our lives and we realize that we have a lot of unexpressed love inside. I want to support people to have as much love as they can while they're alive and while they're in the present moment. So first, I'd like to pose a question to you. How do we love? When I was writing the book and I was identifying the many ways we can love one another, what I realized is that the ways of loving kind of fell into 5 key categories, and you can see them here on the slide. And what I'll do is just give you an example of each one. Some of them are very obvious and others might take a little explanation to understand what they mean. But the ways of acting is the first one, and that one's probably the simplest. This is something like throwing a surprise party for somebody or doing an act of service for them to show your love. The ways of being is less obvious, but let me give you an example. One of those would be showing up in compassion in a conversation. So your inner sense of compassion is the way of being that's so loving in this case. Another example might be being vulnerable in approaching somebody. Now the third way is ways of speaking, and that's again, like the first one, quite obvious, but it's things like saying I love you or writing a note of appreciation to somebody and those types of things. Pretty straightforward. The ways of thinking is encompassed in things like showing up with a non-judgmental approach to somebody, so your thoughts are actually the way that you're showing up in love. Another example might be to approach somebody with curiosity when you speak with them. So that way of thinking is actually an expression of love. And then the final one is ways of touching, and that's again obvious, but it encompasses everything from receiving somebody with a great big hug and really reconnecting with touch, or it might be as simple as a sensual touch or a sexual expression of love. All of these provide a lot of ways in which you can explore how you want to be received in love as you go through the work. I wanted to mention one more thing before we dive into the details of the process, and that really has to do with self-love. This is something I'm very passionate about because while it's not necessary to completely love yourself to find love or have a great relationship, it's certainly a foundational element of what's happening in relationship. So, one thing to know is that loving ourselves is really the best place to practice our skill set and to learn how to meet ourselves and to understand how to communicate love. So, as we enter the process of engaging with ourselves and loving ourselves, we're going to find parts of ourselves that are easily lovable and parts that are less so. And part of this process is learning to accept all of ourselves and to engage with it in a compassionate, loving way. So the book in part is there to teach some of that skill set, and you'll find that woven in through things. And some of the ways of loving are very easily associated with loving another person, and some are a little bit more about how we relate to ourselves, and you'll find that as you go through it. And one skill set I would really encourage you to cultivate as you build better relationships is that to understand that there's a flow in relationship. We extend ourselves in love and we go out and meet somebody else, in the space where we connect, and we aren't always met. And there are going to be times where that's great and times where it's painful. And when it doesn't go well, I want you to imagine that the flow is that you come back to yourself. You don't come back and the temptation is actually to shut down and to close our hearts. But what we want to do is come back in that flow, return to ourselves, take care of ourselves, love ourselves, no matter what happened, and then be able to go back out and extend ourselves. It's almost like an infinity loop. It goes back and forth. Whether it goes well or not, we need to return to ourselves, and our energy, in some sense, goes out to another and then returns to ourselves like this. So it's a beautiful skill set to learn to cultivate. How do you return to yourself? How do you take care of the part of you that feels wounded or hurt, that inner child that's there? And that's something that I really encourage you to think about and to tap into as you play with these tools and reach out to others and try to connect more. Here's the first exercise in the process. If you have your book, go to page 95, or if you're working off the PDF that you downloaded, it would be page 3. You're going to see a chart that has a whole list in 3 columns of desired feelings. And the idea is this is going to help you identify what you're wanting more of in your relationships. So I want you to go through and just think of the different feelings that you're seeing and check off up to 16 boxes that correlate to the feelings you'd like to have more of, or the one, and especially the ones that are most important to you, even if you're already getting those. Exercise is to take that list, and you can see a picture here. If you're using the PDF, you can do it like this side by side, or in your book, you'll have to open to page 96 to do this. But you're going to take your list of 16 desired feelings, and you're going to just narrow them down. So this is the hard part, really, because of course you'd like to have all of them. But what you want to do, and you'll probably find, like I did, that some of them are similar. You're going to just try to whittle it down and say, okay, I'm going to take this list and bring it down to 8, and then ideally to 4, just to make it easy. If you want to use a little bit more or less than that, it's totally fine. There's no right number of ways of loving. We're just trying to get down to a core number of ways that somebody could remember and that you could focus on without it being overwhelming. So for example, you might have a list that says attentive, cherished, connected, grateful, etc. And maybe you say, okay, well, I really, really want to feel cherished, so that's definitely going on my list. I've got maybe grateful and inspired, and I'm going to go with grateful and narrow it down to that. And then you work your way till you've got a shorter list. So I'll pause and let you do the hard work. Exercise in the process is to take your desired feelings, now that you've got 4 or 5 narrowed down, and you're going to find the associated ways of loving that go with those. Now, I made this list up and it's not perfect, so if you find something that doesn't match up that is super important to you, don't worry about it, keep it on your list. But you can use this to sort of cross-check which ways are associated with those feelings so that you can identify specific ways to experience that. So let me give you an example. Here, what you're going to do is take your list, and if you're in the PDF, you're going to have to work through pages 5 through 18, and if you're in the book, it's in pages 97 to 110. So every desired feeling is on the left, and it's all alphabetized. So here's an example that acceptance is important, and on the right are the ways of loving that are associated with that, and they're organized by those 5 groups. So in the case of acceptance, there were a few different kinds of ways of loving, and they were either in the section of ways of being or ways of thinking, and you can see what they are here in the slide. I'll give you an example. For me, what I did was identify that being present is really important to me. And if you looked at that one, it would list 4 or 5 different ways of loving. And I would basically take those and go to the book. So the next step is, once you've sort of highlighted the ones that go together, you're going to go read them all the ones that are in the right column. You're going to, in this case, for if acceptance was one of your words, you would read accepting all of me, patience, self-awareness, wholeness, embracing differences, forgiveness, and respect for who I am. And after you've read those, hopefully one of them will come forward and speak to you loud enough to say, hey, this is super important to me. I'm going to put this on my tentative list of ways of loving that I want to experience. And then you go on to the next desired feeling. Maybe you wanted to experience more safety in your life, and so you go read that list there. Or maybe you want to experience more respect, and then you can read those. And you're going to basically go through the book and flag the ones that are super important to you. Exercise 4 is one of the final steps here, and that is really just to whittle it down and jot down on paper what your final ways of loving are. So if you've read all these different ones, you may have more than 4 or 5 and need to refine your list. And I've provided a page in the paperback in 111 and also in the PDF on page 19, where you can write down your ways of loving for your personal preferences. And I will just add that it may be that you want to do this exercise periodically over time, because I've noticed that some things rise in importance in my life and then others, fall away as they become satisfied. And what you might find is something like a teenager might say to you, I really need more freedom, and that's what is super important to me at this point in my life. And then at another point, that same person may communicate, you know what, I'd really like to experience acknowledgement or respect more. And that's become, one of my top 5, and I have plenty of freedom, and that's not an issue anymore. I'm no longer living at home, for example. And, things have changed. So something simple like your circumstances can change that, or what's important to you as you evolve as a person may change. So you might value something like your growth and learning being supported at one stage, and then at another stage you're just really craving sexual intimacy, and that's become more important. And again, these aren't exclusive. You can have multiple. You're going to have a list of multiple ones, but it's sort of refining which ones are your really, really top values. So the final step in the process is actually really the fun part, and that's sharing what you've learned about yourself. So sharing with you the ones that you love, what your needs are, and what your top values and ways of loving are, is best done from a place of vulnerability and sharing. And something that I think is kind of obvious, but it's good to remember, is that nobody wants to be told they're doing anything wrong, but people love to hear there's a great opportunity. So I'd like to approach people and say, look what I learned about myself. I'm super excited. I want to share this with you. And there's this great opportunity for us to connect more. And let me tell you a little bit about what I would love to receive. And you'll probably find they're doing some of the things that are important to you already. So you can, appreciate them for that and reinforce those, and then tell them other things that you love, and really approach them with curiosity to find out the same things. So the fun part of the process is we begin to exchange this and offer and invite people to do the process with us so that we can understand them and really engage with them in the way that they want to be approached as well, and begin to facilitate a greater flow of love between us. Now that you've finished the process, I just wanted to add a couple more notes. One of those is, if you'd like to go further, there is actually a second book that goes with the Cosmology of Love, and it's called Affirmations of Love, and it takes every single way of loving and gives you further ideas about how to apply them. So if there's something you're trying to cultivate, you can use it as sort of a daily inspiration to read and work with those attributes and qualities. I also want to just remind you that as you're trying to share with other people and connect with them wherever they are in the world, there is not just a paperback, but there's also a Kindle on Amazon, so you can always send it digitally to people and then work with them that way. Thank you so much for joining us at the Love Mandala. We hope this work truly helps you to realize more love in your life.